She was a loving mother, a respected professional, a woman who should have been safe inside her own home. But one spring morning in 2001, her life was violently stolen. The crime scene spoke of rage, of violence, of desperation. Detectives found her body in the shower, beaten, strangled, left behind as though her life meant nothing. The case had everything: DNA, fingerprints, neighbors who heard strange noises. But despite it all, investigators were stumped. For 23 years the killer lived among us, unseen, unsuspected. Until a single plastic water bottle, discarded carelessly at an airport, finally spoke the truth. This is the story of Leslie Jennings Preer, and the cold-blooded killer who thought he'd gotten away forever. May 2, 2001. Chevy Chase, Maryland. A wealthy, tree-lined neighborhood just outside Washington, D.C. The kind of place where you expect quiet mornings, manicured lawns, and safety behind locked doors. That morning, Leslie Jennings Preer, age 50, failed to show up for her job. She was reliable, always on time, always responsive. When coworkers couldn't reach her, a sense of unease began to spread. By midday, police were asked to perform a welfare check at her home on Drummond Avenue. The officers who arrived would never forget what they found. The front door was closed, but inside, the house was eerily silent. Furniture looked disturbed. Upstairs in the shower lay Leslie's lifeless body. She had been beaten with blunt force, then strangled. The scene was violent, chaotic, but strangely intimate. To investigators, this wasn't random. It wasn't a break-in gone wrong. This was personal. Someone wanted Leslie silenced. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep true crime stories. In cases like this, detectives always start close to home. And who's closer than a husband? Statistically, in domestic homicides, the spouse is the prime suspect. Investigators zeroed in quickly. They questioned Leslie's husband intensely, retracing his movements, probing every detail of their marriage. Did they argue the night before? Was there hidden tension beneath the surface? Could jealousy, betrayal, or financial pressure have boiled over into violence? Detectives searched for cracks in his story. They combed through phone records, examined his alibis, and watched for the smallest flicker of guilt during hours of questioning. For a time, suspicion clung to him like a shadow. But the evidence told a different story. Leslie had fought for her life, scraping at her attacker, leaving behind fragments of DNA under her fingernails. When the results came back, they delivered a stunning twist. The DNA belonged to a man, but not to her husband. It was the kind of revelation that reshaped an investigation in an instant. The man closest to her was ruled out. The theory of a domestic crime collapsed. And in its place, a far more chilling reality emerged. The killer was still out there, identity unknown, walking free. Without a clear suspect, the trail began to fade. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into years. Witness memories blurred, evidence grew cold, and the once urgent case slowly slipped into silence. A mother was gone, and her murderer's name remained locked away, hidden in the shadows. But investigators still had one card to play, a powerful one: DNA. In 2001, it was considered the cutting edge of forensic science, almost a silver bullet for solving violent crime. Detectives swabbed beneath Leslie's fingernails, tested the samples, and preserved the genetic fingerprint of her killer. They turned to CODIS, the national database that had already cracked countless cases. If the killer had ever been arrested, even for something minor, his DNA would light up like a beacon. Detectives held their breath as the system searched. No match. They tried again months later, hoping an arrest elsewhere in the country would finally connect the dots. Still nothing. Each time they checked, the result was the same: silence. The science promised certainty, but in this case it delivered only emptiness, a void where a name should have been. Detectives could feel the case slipping from their hands. And so Leslie's file was pushed to the cold case shelves. Another mother gone, another family condemned to wait. Years began to pile up, each one layering dust on the box marked with her name. For 2 decades, the killer's DNA sat in storage, unseen, untouched, yet unchanging. A silent witness, locked inside a freezer, waiting for technology to catch up. waiting for the day when its secret would finally be heard. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep true crime stories. By 2022, 2 decades had passed since Leslie's murder. Detectives who had once been young officers were now veterans. Some had even retired. But the file never really closed. It sat waiting in storage, not forgotten, just unsolved. And now, finally, science had caught up. Forensic genetic genealogy, the same revolutionary tool that unmasked the Golden State Killer, was reshaping cold case investigations across the country. It wasn't about finding a perfect match in a database anymore. It was about building a family tree from fragments. Even the faintest genetic link could lead investigators from a great-grandparent to a distant cousin, until, branch by branch, the tree narrowed toward a single person. Montgomery County detectives decided it was time. They shipped off the DNA sample collected under Leslie's fingernails more than 20 years earlier. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon the results arrived. The lab report didn't offer a name. Not yet. What it revealed was even more intriguing. A web of distant relatives, in Romania. Detectives stared at the chart, trying to comprehend how a Maryland murder connected to families across an ocean. The genealogists went to work. It was painstaking, almost tedious, matching birth records, cross-checking immigration logs, sorting through archives that spanned continents. Bit by bit, a picture began to form. At the outer branches were distant cousins, names that meant nothing to detectives. But as the tree grew narrower, one name leapt out. Eugene Teodor Gligor. The revelation was startling. Gligor wasn't a random stranger who had stumbled into Leslie's home. He wasn't some faceless predator. He was someone who had once been close to the family, the on-again, off-again high school boyfriend of Leslie's daughter, Lauren. For detectives, the discovery landed like a thunderclap. This wasn't an unknown intruder. This was someone who had known the family's rhythms, who had walked through their doors, who had shared meals and memories. All along, the killer had been inside their world, hidden in plain sight. By 2022, Gligor was in his mid-40s. On the surface, he blended easily into the fabric of Washington, D.C., just another man going about his daily life, indistinguishable from the crowd. To a casual observer, nothing about him suggested a dark past. But detectives knew that 21 years earlier, in 2001, his ties to the Preer family ran deep. He hadn't been a stranger at all. He had been romantically involved with Leslie's daughter, Lauren. He had been inside their home, welcomed at their table. He knew the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the times when the house was full and when it stood quiet. He understood their routines in a way only someone close could. That knowledge unsettled investigators. It meant the crime wasn't the work of a faceless intruder, but of someone who had once been trusted. The question loomed, had resentment simmered after the breakup? Had rejection turned into anger, or anger into obsession? Or had some chance encounter sparked a sudden eruption of violence? Detectives didn't yet have those answers. What they did have was DNA, a match, solid and undeniable, that tied him back to the fingernail scrapings collected from Leslie all those years ago. For the first time in 23 years, they weren't chasing shadows. They had a name. Still, suspicion wasn't proof. In the courtroom, genealogy pointed the way, but it couldn't stand alone. To bring a case that would hold up against a defense, they needed something stronger. They needed fresh DNA from Gligor himself, something obtained in the present day. The net was tightening, but the final trap had yet to be sprung. Now, everything depended on confirmation. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep true crime stories. Sometimes, the biggest breakthroughs come in the smallest, most ordinary packages. For investigators who had waited more than 2 decades, the break arrived not through high drama or a dramatic confession, but through a routine moment at an airport. June 2024. Dulles International Airport buzzed with the steady rhythm of travelers. Families hurried to gates, business people tapped away at laptops, announcements echoed over the loudspeakers. And somewhere in that crowd was Eugene Teodor Gligor, a man carrying a secret that had eluded justice for 23 years. Routine checks pulled him aside for secondary screening. To Gligor, it was nothing unusual, just another minor inconvenience of travel. He sat in a small waiting area, sterile and unremarkable as fluorescent lights hummed above. An officer handed him a bottle of water. He drank. He set the bottle down. And when his screening was finished, he walked away, leaving it behind. To most people, it was garbage. To detectives, it was destiny. They moved quickly, securing the bottle, sealing it in evidence bags as though it were the most precious artifact in the world. It was rushed to the crime lab where scientists swabbed the rim, the mouthpiece, the cap. Hours later, the test results were clear and undeniable. The DNA on that discarded water bottle was a perfect match to the DNA found under Leslie Preer's fingernails back in 2001. After 23 years, the silence was broken. The killer had finally named himself. June 18, 2024. After 23 years of waiting, it all came down to a single morning in Washington, D.C. The streets looked ordinary, but to the U.S. Marshals Task Force lying in wait, this was the endgame. They had tracked their suspect, planned every angle, and rehearsed every move. When Eugene Teodor Gligor stepped into view, the order was given. Officers closed in with swift precision. Within moments, the man who had hidden in plain sight for decades was surrounded. There was no dramatic chase, no last-second escape, just the sudden realization that the past had finally caught up with him. He was placed in handcuffs, his quiet life shattered in an instant. 4 detectives who had carried the burden of Leslie Preer's murder across their careers, the arrest was vindication, a moment they weren't sure they'd ever see. For Leslie's family, it was the first real glimpse of justice, a confirmation that she had not been forgotten. The man who thought time and silence would protect him had been undone by the simplest mistake, a discarded bottle of water, and the cold certainty of DNA. Proof that no matter how long it takes, science remembers what killers hope the world will forget. But a courtroom is its own kind of battlefield, where words cut deeper than weapons and every detail can shift the outcome of a case. In May 2025, Eugene Teodor Gligor stood before the judge, no longer just a name on a cold case file, but a man forced to confront the crime he had tried to bury with time. To the shock of many, he didn't contest the evidence. Instead, he entered a plea of guilty, but not to first-degree murder. His admission was limited to second-degree murder, a charge that carried fewer years, fewer consequences. His attorneys argued that he had been intoxicated, that his memory of that night was clouded, fragmented. They painted him as a man who had lost control, not as a cold-blooded killer. The prosecution fought back hard. This, they said, was no accident, no drunken outburst. This was a brutal and deliberate act of violence, carried out with rage and intent. They urged the judge to impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. The courtroom grew tense as Judge David Lease weighed the arguments. Reporters filled the benches, the Preer family sat in silence, waiting for words that could never bring Leslie back but might at least bring some measure of justice. Finally, the decision came down: 30 years in prison with all but 22 years to serve, plus 5 years of supervised probation after release. A heavy sentence in some eyes, yet far less than the life term many had hoped for. For Leslie's family, it was a moment of bittersweet closure. The punishment would never equal the pain of their loss, but after 24 long years, the killer had finally been named, convicted, and locked away. Leslie's case wasn't just another cold file pulled from a shelf. It became a milestone, Maryland's first homicide solved through familial DNA. It proved something powerful, that even when years pass, when evidence grows dusty and witnesses fade, the truth can still speak. All it took was one overlooked detail, one ordinary object turned extraordinary, a plastic water bottle, casually discarded at an airport security screening. A careless sip revealed what decades of silence had concealed. It's haunting to think about. How many other unsolved crimes are waiting for their moment? How many killers walk free today, unaware that a single strand of hair, a touch on a doorknob, or a trace of DNA under a fingernail might one day expose them? The legacy of Leslie's case is not only justice for her family, but a warning to others who believe time erases guilt. Science is relentless. Technology marches forward. And the smallest clue, preserved in the quiet of an evidence room, may someday rise again to tell the truth. Leslie Jennings Preer was more than a victim. She was a mother, a friend, a woman with a future that was cruelly taken. For 23 years her family lived without answers. And yet, justice found its way back, carried in the most unlikely of vessels, a discarded bottle of water. The lesson is chilling. Killers may think time is on their side. But time, paired with science, can be the very thing that brings them down. For Leslie, truth came late, but it came. And for the rest of us, her story is a haunting reminder that evil may hide in plain sight, but the past never stays buried.